My boyfriend threw my anniversary gift in the trash and laughed with his friends. But when I discovered what he really thought about me, 3 years of silence finally made sense. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this 25 years old. That's how old I was when I thought I had found my forever person. My name is Sarah, and for the past 3 years, I've been working as a children's librarian at the downtown branch in Portland, Oregon. It's not the most glamorous job, but I absolutely love it. There's something magical about watching a shy kid discover their favorite book series, or helping a struggling reader finally connect with a story that speaks to them. I live in a cozy one-bedroom apartment that I've decorated with plants and fairy lights, creating this warm sanctuary that feels like home. My parents live about 2 hours away in Salem, and while we're close, I've always been the independent type who wanted to make her own way in the world. I guess that's why when I met Marcus 3 years ago at a coffee shop near the university, I was so determined to make our relationship work entirely on my own terms. Marcus Rodriguez was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He was 28, worked in marketing for a tech startup, and had this confident way of carrying himself that made heads turn when he walked into a room. He was tall, with dark hair that he always styled perfectly, and he wore these expensive-looking button-down shirts that made him look like he stepped out of a magazine. When he asked for my number that first day, I literally felt my hands shake as I typed it into his phone. Our relationship started like something out of a romantic movie. He would text me good morning every day, send me little photos of things that reminded him of me, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to make me smile. For the first few months, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. Here was this successful, handsome guy who somehow chose me, quiet, bookish Sarah, who preferred nights in with a good novel to going out to trendy bars. But looking back now, I realized that even from the very beginning, there were these tiny moments that should have told me everything I needed to know about how he really saw me. The way he would pause just a second too long when I suggested restaurants. How he would nod and smile when I talked about my job, but never really ask follow-up questions. The way he introduced me to his friends as Sarah, rather than my girlfriend Sarah, for the first 6 months we were together. I remember our 3-month anniversary like it was yesterday. I had planned this whole surprise evening because he had mentioned loving Italian food. I spent weeks researching the perfect restaurant, made reservations at this intimate little place with amazing reviews, and even bought a new dress that I thought would make his eyes light up when he saw me. The night started beautifully. He picked me up right on time, complimented my dress, and seemed genuinely excited about the surprise. But the moment we sat down at the restaurant, I could feel something shift. He kept looking around at the other tables, checking his phone more than usual. And when the waiter brought the wine list, I watched his face change completely. "Babe, this place is really nice," he said. But the way he said nice made my stomach drop. "The prices are pretty steep, though. Are you sure about this?" I felt heat creep up my neck. "It's our anniversary, Marcus. I wanted to do something special." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, you're so thoughtful. I just want to make sure you're comfortable with spending this much." The thing is, I had saved up for weeks to afford this dinner. I had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch and skipping my usual coffee shop visits to make sure I could treat us to something really special. But sitting there, watching him calculate the cost of everything we ordered, I started to feel embarrassed about my choice. "Maybe we should just get appetizers," I suggested, my voice getting smaller. No. If this is what you want, then let's do it," he said, but I could hear the reluctance in his voice. The rest of the dinner felt forced. He ate everything on his plate, complimented the food, and even held my hand across the table. But there was this underlying tension that I couldn't shake. When the check came, he insisted on splitting it, to be fair, which meant I ended up paying for the entire expensive meal I had planned as my treat to him. Walking back to his car, he put his arm around me and said, "Thank you for tonight, Sarah. You always go out of your way to make things special. You're really sweet." There was that word again. Sweet. Not wonderful, not amazing, not incredible. Just sweet. Like I was a pleasant little gesture he had to appreciate. That night, lying in my bed after he dropped me off, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out why I felt so empty after what should have been a perfect anniversary dinner. I told myself that maybe he was just being practical about money, that maybe I had been too extravagant, that maybe sweet was actually a really lovely compliment. I had no idea that this pattern, me planning, him subtly showing disapproval, me taking the blame and adjusting my expectations, was going to define every single month of the next 3 years. Our 6-month anniversary came and went with a quiet dinner at a chain restaurant that he chose. Our 1-year anniversary was a movie and takeout at my apartment because he said he preferred low-key celebrations. By our 2nd anniversary, I had learned to ask him what he wanted to do instead of planning surprises, and somehow that felt like growth instead of giving up. But last week, on our 3-year anniversary, I decided to try one more time to do something really meaningful. I had been saving up for months to buy him this vintage watch that he had admired in a store window during one of our walks downtown. It wasn't cheap. It cost me nearly $400, which was a huge expense on my librarian salary. But I wanted to show him how much our relationship meant to me. I wrapped it carefully in this beautiful box with a handwritten note note, telling him all the reasons I loved him and how excited I was about our future together. I planned to give it to him after a nice dinner at home, complete with candles and his favorite pasta dish. But that anniversary dinner never happened the way I imagined it would. Instead, it became the night that would finally show me exactly what 3 years of being called sweet really meant. What I discovered that evening would make me question every single moment of happiness I thought we had shared, every time he had told me he loved me, and every plan I had made for our future together. The night of our 3rd anniversary started exactly like I had planned. I had left work early to stop by the grocery store and pick up everything I needed to make Marcus's favorite meal, this creamy mushroom pasta that he always ordered whenever we went to Italian restaurants. I wanted everything to be perfect, so I even bought fresh flowers for the table and picked up a bottle of wine that the store clerk recommended. By the time Marcus arrived at my apartment at 7, I had transformed my little dining area into something that looked almost romantic. Candles were flickering on the table, the pasta was perfectly al dente, and I had changed into this soft blue dress that he had complimented once before. I felt nervous but excited, like I was finally going to show him how much he meant to me. "Wow, Sarah, this looks amazing," he said when he walked in, and for a moment, I felt that flutter of happiness that used to come so easily in our early days. "You really went all out." We sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed naturally. He told me about a project at work that was going well, and I shared a funny story about one of the kids at the library who had insisted that dragons were real because he had seen one in a book. Marcus laughed at all the right moments, and I started to relax, thinking that maybe this anniversary would be different from all the others. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, I took a deep breath and said, "I have something for you." I had hidden the watch box in my bedroom, and when I brought it out, I could see his eyebrows raised slightly. The box itself was elegant, black velvet with a silver ribbon, and I had spent almost as much time wrapping it as I had picking out the gift itself. "Sarah, you didn't have to get me anything," he said, but he was already reaching for the box with what looked like genuine curiosity. I sat down next to him, my heart racing as he untied the ribbon and opened the lid. For just a second, I saw his face light up in genuine surprise. The watch was beautiful, vintage, with a leather band and a classic face that looked both timeless and sophisticated. "Oh my God, Sarah, this is," he started, lifting the watch out of the box and examining it closely. "This is really nice. This must have been expensive. I wanted to get you something special," I said quietly, "something that would remind you of us every time you looked at it." He was quiet for a moment, still looking at the watch, and I could see him thinking. Then he looked up at me with this expression that I couldn't quite read. "Sarah, this is incredibly thoughtful. Thank you so much." He leaned over and kissed me, and I felt this rush of relief and happiness. Finally, I had gotten it right. Finally, I had found a way to show him how much I loved him that he could truly appreciate. "Put it on," I said excitedly. "I want to see how it looks." He fastened the watch around his wrist, and it looked perfect on him. "It's beautiful," he said, admiring it. "Really beautiful. Thank you." We spent the rest of the evening cuddled up on my couch, watching a movie, and I kept glancing at the watch on his wrist, feeling proud and happy every time I saw it there. When he left that night, he kissed me goodbye and said, "Tonight was perfect, Sarah. Thank you for everything." I went to bed that night feeling like we had finally turned a corner, like maybe all those times I had felt dismissed or unimportant had just been in my head. The watch had been expensive, yes, but seeing his reaction made every penny worth it. For the next few days, Marcus seemed different, more attentive, more affectionate. He texted me more frequently, called me during his lunch breaks, and even suggested we go out for dinner that weekend to celebrate our anniversary properly. I felt like I was floating. But then, 3 days after our anniversary, everything changed. Marcus had plans to hang out with his college friends that Friday night, Jake, Tommy, and David. They had this monthly tradition where they would get together at one of their apartments, order pizza, and just catch up. Marcus had been going to these hangouts for as long as we had been dating, and I had always thought it was sweet that he maintained these close friendships. That Friday, he was supposed to go to Jake's apartment, which happened to be in the same complex as my friend Lisa. Lisa and I had made plans to have a girls' night, face masks, wine, and terrible romantic comedies. And when Marcus mentioned he would be practically next door, we joked about how funny it was that we would be so close but doing completely different things. Around 9 o'clock, Lisa and I decided to take a break from our movie marathon and step outside onto her balcony for some fresh air. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, and from her balcony, you could see directly across the courtyard to Jake's apartment. The sliding door was open, and we could hear the guys laughing and talking loudly. "Marcus seems like he's having fun," Lisa said, gesturing toward the noise. I smiled, happy that he was enjoying himself with his friends. He doesn't get to see them as often as he'd like. But then, as we were standing there, I heard something that made my blood run cold. "Dude, you should have seen Sarah's face when I opened that watch," Marcus was saying, his voice carrying clearly across across the courtyard. She was so proud of herself for spending all that money. My stomach dropped. Lisa grabbed my arm, her eyes wide, but I held up my hand to signal that I wanted to keep listening. How much did it cost? I heard Jake ask. She didn't tell me exactly, but I looked it up online. $400, easy, maybe more. Marcus's voice was filled with this tone I had never heard before, dismissive, almost mocking. Can you imagine spending that much on a watch when you work at a library? $400? Tommy's voice was incredulous. Dude, that's like half her rent, right? Marcus laughed, and the sound made me feel sick. She's been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for weeks. I thought she was on some weird health kick, but now I'm wondering if she was saving up for this thing. The guys were all laughing now, and I felt Lisa's hand tighten on my arm. I wanted to move, to go back inside, to pretend I hadn't heard any of this, but I was frozen in place. So what are you going to do with it? David asked. I don't know, man. I can't exactly tell her I don't want it. She was so excited about the whole thing. Marcus's voice sounded tired now, like he was talking about dealing with a troublesome child. I'll probably wear it when I'm with her and just, I don't know, forget to put it on other times. That's harsh, bro, Jake said, but he was still chuckling. Look, Sarah's sweet and all, Marcus continued, but sometimes she just doesn't get it. Like, we're not at that level where we're spending this kind of money on each other. We're not engaged or anything. It's just a lot. There was a pause, and then Tommy said, are you thinking about breaking up with her? Another pause that felt like forever. I don't know, Marcus said finally. I mean, she's convenient, you know? She's always available, she cooks for me, she doesn't ask for much, but sometimes I feel like she's more invested in this relationship than I am. 3 years is a long time to be with someone you're not sure about, David pointed out. Yeah, I know, but it's not like she's going anywhere. Sarah's the type who would wait around forever if I let her. The laughter that followed that comment was the sound that finally broke me out of my frozen state. I stumbled backward into Lisa's apartment, my face burning with humiliation and my eyes filling with tears. Lisa followed me inside and immediately wrapped me in a hug. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. But I wasn't crying yet. I was just numb because suddenly everything made sense. Every lukewarm response, every time he had called me sweet instead of beautiful, every time I had felt like I was trying too hard, it all clicked into place. He had been tolerating me for 3 years. I was convenient. I was available. I was the girl who would wait around forever. And that watch, my beautiful, thoughtful, expensive anniversary gift, was just another example of how I didn't get it. Sitting in Lisa's living room that night, I realized that I had spent 3 years loving someone who saw me as a placeholder. Someone who thought my devotion was sweet but also kind of pathetic. Someone who couldn't even be bothered to pretend to appreciate the biggest gesture I had ever made for him. But what I didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Because what Marcus did with that watch the very next day would show me exactly how little I had ever meant to him. And it would finally give me the strength to do something I should have done 3 years ago. I barely slept that Friday night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear Marcus's voice saying those words. She's convenient. She's the type who would wait around forever if I let her. I kept replaying our entire relationship in my head, looking for signs I had missed. Moments that suddenly made terrible sense. The next morning, Marcus texted me like nothing had happened. Good morning, beautiful. Had so much fun with the guys last night. Want to grab brunch today? Beautiful. He called me beautiful in a text, but told his friends I was just convenient. I stared at that message for almost an hour, trying to figure out how to respond. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, but another part of me, the part that had been trained over 3 years to doubt myself, wondered if maybe I had misunderstood what I'd heard. I texted back, sure, let's meet at that place on Morrison. When I saw him at the restaurant, he was wearing the watch. It looked perfect on his wrist, just like I had imagined, and for a split second, I felt that old flutter of pride. Then I remembered his words from the night before, and the watch suddenly looked different to me, like a beautiful lie strapped to his arm. You look tired, he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. Late night with Lisa? Something like that, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Throughout brunch, I found myself studying his face, looking for signs of the person who had mocked my gift just hours earlier. But he seemed completely normal, attentive, asking about my plans for the weekend, complimenting the food. He even reached across the table to hold my hand, the watch gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the window. I really love this watch, Sarah, he said, lifting his wrist slightly. I've been thinking about it all morning. Thank you again for such a thoughtful gift. The words sounded sincere, but now I knew they weren't. Now I knew he was just performing the role of grateful boyfriend while privately thinking I was foolish for spending so much money on him. I'm glad you like it, I managed to say. After brunch, Marcus said he had some errands to run, and I said I needed to go home to do laundry. We kissed goodbye in the parking lot, and I watched him drive away, still wearing my watch, still playing the part of the loving boyfriend. I spent Saturday afternoon in a daze, mechanically folding clothes and trying to process what I was feeling. It wasn't just hurt. It was this deep sense of betrayal that went beyond the conversation I had overheard. I felt like I had been living in a relationship with someone who didn't exist, someone who had been carefully crafted to keep me happy while hiding who he really was. Sunday came and went without much contact from Marcus, which was unusual. Normally, we would spend at least part of the weekend together, but he said he was busy with family stuff. stuff. I was almost grateful for the space because I wasn't sure I could keep pretending everything was normal. But Monday morning, everything got so much worse. I was working the early shift at the library, opening up the children's section and getting ready for story time, when my phone buzzed with a text from my friend Emma. Emma worked at a coffee shop downtown, not far from Marcus's office, and she knew him by sight from the times I had brought him there. The text was just a photo with the message, "Isn't this Marcus? Why is his watch in the trash outside our shop?" My heart stopped. The photo showed the dumpster behind Emma's coffee shop, and there, sitting on top of a pile of garbage, was the watch. My watch. The vintage watch I had saved for months to buy. The watch that was supposed to represent 3 years of love and commitment. I called Emma immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely dial. "Emma, are you sure that's the same watch?" "Sarah, I'm positive. I remember you showing me pictures of it before you bought it. The leather band, the silver face, it's definitely the same one. I was taking out the trash about an hour ago, and there it was, just sitting there like someone tossed it without a care in the world. Is it damaged? Maybe it broke and he had to throw it away?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "Honey, I picked it up to look at it. It's in perfect condition. The band isn't even scratched." I felt like I was going to be sick. "Emma, can you keep it for me? I'll come get it during my lunch break." "Of course. Sarah, are you okay? What's going on?" "I don't know yet," I whispered, "but I will soon." The rest of my morning at work passed in a blur. I went through the motions of story time, helped parents find books for their kids, and organized returned materials, but my mind was completely elsewhere. All I could think about was that watch sitting in the garbage, discarded like it meant nothing. During my lunch break, I drove to Emma's coffee shop with my heart pounding. She met me at the back door and handed me a small bag. "I cleaned it off a little," she said gently. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how you're feeling right now." I opened the bag and pulled out the watch. It was beautiful, just as perfect as the day I had given it to him. The face gleamed. The leather band was supple and unmarked, and when I turned it over, I could see the engraving I had added. "To Marcus. Time stands still when I'm with you. Love, Sarah." He had thrown away a $400 watch with a personalized engraving like it was a piece of junk mail. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop, holding that watch and crying harder than I had cried in years. Not just because of the money I had wasted, not just because of the time I had spent picking out the perfect gift, but because of what it represented. He had looked me in the eye for 3 days, wearing this watch, thanking me for it, calling it beautiful, all while planning to throw it away at the first opportunity. Then my phone rang. Marcus. "Hey babe, how's your day going?" His voice sounded so normal, so casual, like he hadn't just thrown my heart into a dumpster. "It's fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How's yours?" "Pretty good. Actually, I have some bad news about the watch." Here it comes, I thought, the lie he had prepared to explain why he wasn't wearing it anymore. "I was walking to get coffee this morning and the band somehow came loose. The watch fell off my wrist and rolled into a storm drain before I could catch it. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I feel terrible about it." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost believed him. Almost. "Oh no," I said, matching his tone of disappointment. "That's awful. Are you sure you can't get it back?" "I tried, but it's gone. I'm really sorry, babe. I know how much that watch meant to you, how much it meant to me. Not to him, never to him. These things happen," I heard myself saying. "It's just a watch. You're being so understanding about this. Thank you for not being upset with me." After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes, just staring at the watch in my hands. He had thrown it away and then called me to lie about it, probably because one of his friends had suggested he needed a cover story. He was so confident that I would believe him, so sure that sweet, convenient Sarah would just accept his explanation and move on. But as I sat there, something inside me began to shift. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but underneath them was something else. Something I hadn't felt in 3 years of this relationship. Anger. Not the sad, self-doubting kind of anger that makes you question whether you have a right to be upset. Real anger. The kind that burns clear and bright and gives you perfect clarity about what needs to happen next. I drove back to the library and finished my shift in a strange state of calm determination. I smiled at the children, helped their parents, and went through all the motions of my normal day. But inside, I was planning. Marcus thought he knew me. He thought I was the kind of person who would wait around forever, who would accept whatever scraps of affection he was willing to give me, who would believe whatever lies he told me as long as they were delivered with a smile and a pet name. He thought I was convenient. He was about to learn just how wrong he had been about me for the past 3 years. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep his deception went, because if he could lie so easily about the watch, if he could throw away something that cost me months of saving without a second thought, what else had he been lying about? That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out who Marcus really was, and I was going to make sure he understood exactly what he had lost. The sweet, convenient Sarah he thought he knew was about to disappear forever. That evening, I did something I had never done in 3 years of dating Marcus. I started investigating. It began innocently enough. I was sitting on my couch, still holding that watch, when I remembered something that had always nagged at me. Marcus had told me early in our relationship that he wasn't really a social media person, that he preferred to keep his private life private. He had Instagram and Facebook accounts, but they were sparse. A few pictures of food, some work events, nothing personal. He said he just wasn't into putting his whole whole life online. I had always respected that, even found it refreshing compared to other guys I had dated who documented everything. But now, with this new clarity about who he really was, I started wondering what else he might be hiding behind that preference for privacy. I opened Instagram and looked at his profile again, but this time, instead of just scrolling through his few posts, I started looking at who he followed and who followed him. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. There were women, lots of women, and not just random accounts. These were women who clearly knew him personally, women who liked every single one of his posts, women whose profiles showed them at the same bars he went to, the same restaurants, the same events. I clicked on one profile, a girl named Ashley with long blonde hair and perfect makeup in every photo. Her account was public, and as I scrolled through her pictures, I saw something that made me feel like I was falling through the floor. There was Marcus. In photo after photo, going back months, Marcus at a concert I had never heard him mention. Marcus at a beach trip that supposedly happened during a weekend when he told me he was visiting his sick aunt in Seattle. Marcus with his arm around Ashley at what looked like a company party. The same company party he had told me was just boring work stuff and that I wouldn't enjoy. With shaking hands, I scrolled further back. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago. The photos went back almost our entire relationship, showing Marcus living what appeared to be a completely separate life with people I had never met, at events I had never been invited to. But the photo that broke me was from just 2 weeks ago. Ashley and Marcus at a fancy restaurant, both dressed up, his hand holding hers across the table. The caption read, 2 years with my favorite person / anniversary. 2 years. Their 2-year anniversary was 2 weeks ago, right around the same time Marcus and I were celebrating our 3-year anniversary. I sat there staring at that photo until my eyes burned, trying to process what I was seeing. Marcus wasn't just dismissive of our relationship. He was actively living in another one. While I was saving up for months to buy him a watch, he was celebrating anniversaries with someone else. While I was cooking him dinner and planning romantic evenings, he was taking Ashley to the exact kind of upscale restaurants he always seemed reluctant to go to with me. I started screenshotting everything, every photo, every caption, every comment that showed how long this had been going on. My hands were steady now, my mind crystal clear. The hurt was still there, but it was buried under a layer of cold, determined fury. Then I did something that 3 years ago would have been unthinkable to me. I created a fake Instagram account. I used a stock photo of a brunette woman, came up with a believable name and bio, and started following some of the same people Marcus and Ashley followed. Within an hour, I had enough information to piece together the scope of his deception. Not only was he in a relationship with Ashley, but their friends all knew about it. There were group photos from parties where Marcus was clearly Ashley's boyfriend, comments from mutual friends about what a cute couple they were, and references to trips and events that spanned our entire relationship. I was the other woman in my own relationship, and I had never even known it. But the discovery that finally pushed me over the edge came when I found Ashley's Facebook page. It wasn't public like her Instagram, but through some careful searching, I found a mutual friend, someone who worked at the same coffee shop as Emma, and was able to see some of her posts. Ashley worked in marketing too, but at a different company. She lived in a beautiful apartment downtown that I recognized from some of her photos. And according to her relationship status, she had been in a relationship with Marcus Rodriguez for 2 years. 2 years. Which meant that Marcus had started dating her while we were already together. While I was falling in love with him, planning our future, celebrating our first anniversary, he was beginning an entirely separate relationship with someone else. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, just thinking. Everything made sense now. Why he was never available for weekend trips. Why he was always vague about his plans with friends. Why he seemed so uncomfortable whenever I suggested we spend more time together or make our relationship more serious. Why he had been so dismissive of my anniversary gift. He wasn't just stringing me along, he was actively building a life with someone else while keeping me as his backup plan, his safety net, his convenient option for when Ashley wasn't available. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I had never used a sick day for anything other than actually being sick, but I needed time to prepare for what I was about to do. I spent the morning gathering everything I needed. I printed out the screenshots from Ashley's social media accounts. I took photos of the watch, including the engraving. I wrote down a timeline of every lie Marcus had told me, every excuse he had made, every time he had made me feel like I was asking for too much. Then I sent Marcus a text. "Can you come over tonight? I want to cook dinner for you. I have something important I want to talk about." His response came quickly. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I wrote back. "See you at 7. I spent the afternoon cooking. Not his favorite pasta, but my favorite meal. A meal I actually enjoyed. From a recipe my grandmother had taught me years ago. I wasn't cooking for him anymore. I was cooking for myself, for the woman I was about to become. When Marcus arrived at 7, he looked relaxed and happy. He kissed me hello, complimented the smell of dinner, and settled onto my couch like he had 100 times before. "This smells amazing," he said. "What's the occasion?" "Just felt like doing something special," I replied replied, bringing him a glass of wine. We ate dinner and made small talk about our days. He told me about a project at work, asked about the library, and seemed completely at ease. Several times during the meal, I caught him looking at his bare wrist where the watch should have been, and I had to suppress the urge to smile. After we finished eating, I cleared the plates and said, Marcus, remember how you said you wanted to talk about something important? He looked confused. I think you said you wanted to talk about something important. Right, I said, sitting down across from him. I do. I reached under the coffee table and pulled out a folder containing all the evidence I had gathered. I set it down between us, along with the watch. I found your watch, I said calmly. His face went pale. What do you mean? I mean, I found it in the dumpster behind Emma's coffee shop, exactly where you threw it. For a moment, he just stared at the watch, and I could see his mind racing, trying to come up with another lie. Sarah, I can explain. I'm sure you can. I interrupted. You're very good at explaining things, like how you explained why we couldn't go to that concert last month, the one you went to with Ashley, or how you explained why you couldn't come to my friend's wedding, the same weekend you went to the beach with your real girlfriend. I opened the folder and started laying out the printed photos, one by one. Marcus's face changed with each image, going from confusion to panic to something that looked almost like relief. Sarah, listen. No, Marcus. For 3 years, I've listened. I've listened to your excuses, your lies, your reasons why I wasn't good enough for the restaurants you take her to, why I wasn't worth the effort you put into your actual relationship. Tonight, you're going to listen to me. I picked up one of the photos, the one of him and Ashley at their anniversary dinner. 2 years, Marcus. You've been with her for 2 years, which means you started dating her while you were telling me you loved me, while I was planning our future, while I was saving up my grocery money to buy you gifts you threw in the trash. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I know about Ashley. I know about the apartment she thinks you're going to move into together. I know about the friends who think you're such a great boyfriend to her. I know about the life you've been building while using me as your convenient backup plan. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sat there staring at the evidence of his deception spread out on my coffee table, and for the first time in 3 years, he had nothing to say. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not love, not even regret, just calculation. He was trying to figure out if there was any way to spin this in his favor. Sarah, he said slowly, you don't understand. Ashley and I, it's complicated. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. After everything, after all the evidence, his first instinct was still to lie to me. You're right, Marcus. I don't understand. I don't understand how someone can look another person in the eye every day and lie to them. I don't understand how you can take someone's love and treat it like it's worthless. I don't understand how you can be so cruel to someone who never did anything but love you. I stood up and walked to my front door, opening it wide. But here's what I do understand. I understand that you need to leave. I understand that you need to take all of your things and get out of my apartment and my life. And I understand that if you ever contact me again, Ashley is going to get a very interesting package of photos and screenshots. Marcus looked shocked. Sarah, you wouldn't. Try me, I said, and for the first time in our entire relationship, my voice was completely steady. You have 10 minutes to get whatever you have here and leave. He stood up slowly, looking around my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. Sarah, please, can't we talk about this? We just did, I replied. 9 minutes. I watched him gather his things, a few shirts from my closet, a phone charger, some books he had left on my nightstand. He moved like he was in a daze, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. When he reached the door, he turned back to me one last time. Sarah, I never meant for this to happen. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no sadness. Just a deep sense of relief that I would never have to pretend to be someone I wasn't for him ever again. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant for all of it to happen. You just never meant for me to find out. And then I closed the door on 3 years of lies, 3 years of feeling like I wasn't enough, and 3 years of loving someone who never existed in the first place. The silence that filled my apartment after Marcus left was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the heavy, anxious quiet that used to follow our arguments, when I would spend hours replaying every word and wondering what I had done wrong. This was different. This was the sound of freedom. I walked back to my living room and looked at the evidence still scattered across my coffee table, the photos, the screenshots, the watch that had started it all. 3 hours ago, these items had felt like weapons. Now they just looked like pieces of paper and metal. The truth they represented had already done its work. I picked up the watch and turned it over to read the engraving one more time. To Marcus, time stands still when I'm with you. Love, Sarah. The words that had once felt so romantic now seemed like they belonged to a different person entirely. A person who believed that love meant accepting crumbs and calling them a feast. I walked to my kitchen, opened the trash can, and dropped the watch inside. It landed with a small, satisfying thud. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my sister. Sarah, what's wrong? It's almost 10 o'clock. Jessica answered on the second ring, her voice immediately alert. Nothing's wrong, I said, and realized that for the first time in months, it was true. Actually, everything's right. I just broke up with Marcus. There was a pause. Jessica had never particularly liked Marcus, though she had been careful never to say so directly. She was 5 years older than me, lived in San Francisco with her husband and 2 kids, and had always been the one I called when I needed someone to tell me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. What happened? She asked gently. I told her everything. The conversation I had overheard, the watch in the dumpster, the discovery of Ashley, the confrontation. Jessica listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, she said finally, I am so proud of you. You are? I have been waiting 3 years for you to see what everyone else could see. That guy never deserved you. Not for one single day. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because you weren't ready to hear it. And honestly, I wasn't sure you would ever be ready. You loved him so much, and you kept making excuses for him, and I was terrified you were going to waste your whole life trying to be enough for someone who was never going to appreciate you. I started crying then, but they weren't sad tears. They were relief tears, gratitude tears, tears for the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. Jess, I feel like I've been living someone else's life for 3 years. You have been. You've been living the life Marcus wanted you to live. Quiet, convenient, undemanding. But that's not who you are, Sarah. You're smart and funny and creative and kind, and you deserve someone who sees all of that and celebrates it. We talked for another hour, and by the time I hung up, I felt like I had reconnected with a part of myself I had lost somewhere along the way. The part that had opinions about restaurants, that planned surprise dates, that believed she deserved to be called beautiful instead of just sweet. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and felt genuinely excited about going to work. I put on a dress I hadn't worn in months, a bright red one that Marcus had once said was a little much for a Tuesday, and actually styled my hair instead of just throwing it in a ponytail. At the library, everything felt different. Colors seemed brighter, conversations felt more meaningful, and I found myself laughing with my coworkers in a way I hadn't in years. During story time, I read with more energy and enthusiasm than I had in months, and several parents commented on how animated I seemed. It was during my lunch break that my phone started buzzing with text messages. The first one was from Marcus. Sarah, I've been thinking about last night. I think we should talk. There are things you don't understand about my situation with Ashley. I deleted it without responding. The second was from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Sarah? This is Ashley Thompson. I think we need to talk. My heart stopped. I stared at that message for a full minute before typing back. Yes, this is Sarah. I agree. Ashley called me 20 minutes later. Her voice was shaky when she introduced herself, and I could tell she had been crying. Sarah, I don't know what Marcus told you about me, but I found some text messages on his phone last night, and I think we've both been lied to. What kind of text messages? Messages between him and his friends, talking about how he was handling both of us, how he had figured out how to keep us both happy without either of us knowing about the other. There were messages going back months, Sarah, months of him laughing about how easy it was to manipulate us both. I felt sick, but not surprised. Ashley, how long have you been together? 2 years, but according to these messages, he never broke up with you. He just kept us both. He would tell me he was working late or visiting family, and apparently he was with you, and he would tell you he was with friends or had work obligations, and he was with me. We talked for almost an hour, comparing stories, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding of who Marcus really was. Ashley had been just as deceived as I had been, just as manipulated and lied to. The difference was that Marcus had been more invested in their relationship, probably because she had never been as accommodating as I had been. Sarah, I broke up with him last night, Ashley said toward the end of our conversation. After I found those messages, I couldn't even look at him. I told him to get his stuff and get out. Good for you, I said, and I meant it. There's something else, Ashley continued. He's been telling people at work that you were just a friend he felt sorry for, that you had a crush on him and he was too nice to tell you he wasn't interested. The audacity of it took my breath away, even in his lies to cover his tracks. Marcus couldn't resist making me out to be pathetic. Ashley, would you be willing to do something with me? What? I think Marcus needs to understand that his actions have consequences, and I think the people he's been lying to deserve to know the truth. What Ashley and I did next probably wasn't the most mature response, but it felt absolutely necessary. Together, we crafted a detailed Facebook post that laid out exactly what Marcus had been doing to both of us. We included screenshots of his messages to his friends, photos showing the overlapping timelines of our relationships, and a clear, factual account of his deception. We tagged him in it. Along with his friends from that night, I had overheard them laughing about me. We posted it to a local community group we both knew he was part of. We sent it to his workplace's public page. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments from people who knew Marcus, expressing shock and support for both of us. Several women came forward with their own stories of similar behavior from him. His friends, Jake, Tommy, and David, were noticeably silent, but the most satisfying response came from Marcus himself. He called me that evening, his voice shaking with rage. Sarah, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation? I told the truth, I said calmly. Is there something inaccurate in that post? You had no right to air our private business like that. Our private business? Marcus, there was no our business. There was your elaborate deception, and there were 2 women who deserved to know the truth about the person they were dating. I could sue you for defamation. I laughed. With what evidence? Everything Ashley and I posted was true, and we have the screenshots to prove it. But please, Marcus, go ahead and hire a lawyer. I'd love to see you explain to a judge why you think you have the right to lie to multiple women simultaneously without consequences. He hung up on me. Over the next few days, I heard through mutual friends that Marcus had been having a difficult time. Several of his coworkers had seen the post and were treating him differently. His friends were asking uncomfortable questions. His reputation as the charming, successful guy that every woman wanted was crumbling, and he was finding out how it felt to be the one people whispered about. But the most important consequence wasn't what happened to Marcus. It was what happened to me. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. I started making plans with friends I had neglected while I was trying to be the perfect girlfriend. I signed up for a pottery class I had always wanted to take. I bought groceries without calculating whether I could afford to cook something nice for someone who wouldn't appreciate it. And slowly, I began to remember what it felt like to be valued, to be respected, to be with people who saw my kindness as a strength rather than a weakness to exploit. The woman who had spent months saving up to buy a watch for someone who threw it in the trash was gone. In her place was someone who finally understood her own worth. But the real transformation was still coming, because what I learned about myself in the weeks that followed would prove that losing Marcus wasn't just the end of a bad relationship. It was the beginning of the life I was always meant to live. 6 months later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, not the one where Emma worked, but a new one I had discovered during one of my weekend explorations of Portland neighborhoods I had never bothered to visit while I was with Marcus. I was reading a book I had chosen purely because the cover appealed to me, drinking a lavender latte that I ordered because it sounded interesting, wearing a yellow sundress that made me feel bright and confident. This might sound like a small thing, but for someone who had spent 3 years asking, what would Marcus think, before making any decision, these tiny acts of self-determination felt revolutionary. Ashley and I had become unlikely friends in the months following our mutual liberation from Marcus. We met for coffee every few weeks, sometimes to laugh about the ridiculous lies he had told us both, but more often to celebrate the ways our lives had improved since he was no longer in them. Ashley had been promoted at work, started dating a guy who thought her intelligence was sexy rather than intimidating, and had moved into a beautiful apartment that she decorated exactly the way she wanted. You know what's funny? She had said during our last coffee date, I used to think Marcus was doing me a favor by dating me, like I should be grateful that someone so successful and attractive chose me. It never occurred to me that he should be grateful I chose him. I knew exactly what she meant. For 3 years, I had operated from a position of gratitude rather than equality. I had been so thankful that Marcus wanted to be with me that I never stopped to ask whether I actually wanted to be with him. The Marcus situation had resolved itself in ways that were both satisfying and surprisingly anticlimactic. After the Facebook post and the subsequent social fallout, he had essentially disappeared from both our lives. I heard through mutual friends that he had started dating someone new, a 22-year-old intern at his company who apparently didn't know about his history. I felt a moment of concern for her, but I also knew that some lessons can only be learned through experience. His friends Jake, Tommy, and David had all unfriended him on social media after the truth came out. Apparently, they had been just as uncomfortable with his behavior as I had hoped they would be, but had been too cowardly to confront him about it. The friend group that he had used as his alibi for so many lies had crumbled once they realized they had been unwitting participants in his deception. But the most important change wasn't what had happened to Marcus. It was what had happened to me. I had started therapy, something I probably should have done years earlier. Dr. Chen, my therapist, helped me understand how I had gotten so lost in a relationship that was never really a relationship at all. We talked about people-pleasing, about confusing kindness with weakness, about the difference between loving someone and desperately needing their approval. Sarah, she had said during one of our sessions, you spent 3 years trying to be worthy of someone who was never worthy of you. That session had been a turning point. I started to see that my capacity for love and generosity wasn't a flaw that had made me vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation. It was a strength that had been misdirected towards someone who couldn't appreciate it. I also started setting boundaries in other areas of my life. I stopped saying yes to every extra shift at the library just to avoid conflict. I started expressing my opinions in conversations instead of just agreeing with whatever others said. I learned to recognize the difference between someone disagreeing with me and someone disrespecting me. The pottery class I had signed up for became a weekly highlight. There was something deeply satisfying about working with clay, about creating something beautiful with my own hands, about the way the instructor encouraged us to embrace imperfections as part of the process. I wasn't naturally talented at it, but I was improving, and more importantly, I was enjoying the journey without needing to be perfect at it. I had also started dating again, though very casually and with a completely different mindset than I'd had before. I went on dates with people because I was curious about them, not because I was desperately hoping they would validate my worth as a person. I said no to second dates when the first ones didn't feel right, without agonizing over whether I was being too picky or missing out on something. There was one person I had been seeing for about 2 months, David, a teacher at the elementary school across from the library. He was quiet and thoughtful, with kind eyes and a genuine interest in hearing about my day. What struck me most about him was how he responded when I told him about my situation with Marcus. "I'm sorry someone treated you that way," he had said simply. "You didn't deserve it." No lecture about red flags I should have seen. No suggestion that I had been naive or foolish. Just acknowledgement that what had happened to me was wrong, and compassion for what I had been through. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything to someone who had spent 3 years being told her feelings were unreasonable. I wasn't sure yet where things were going with David, and for the first time in my adult life, that uncertainty didn't terrify me. I was learning to be comfortable with not knowing, with taking things one day at a time, with enjoying someone's company, without immediately planning our entire future together. My relationship with my family had also improved dramatically. Without Marcus consuming so much of my emotional energy, I had more space for the people who actually cared about me. I talked to Jessica almost every week now, and I had even started visiting my parents more often. They had never said anything negative about Marcus while we were together, but the relief in their voices when I told them we had broken up told me everything I needed to know about what they had really thought of him. "You seem like yourself again," my mother had said during my last visit home. I hadn't realized how much I missed that until now. The hardest part of healing wasn't dealing with the anger or the hurt. It was learning to trust my own judgment again. For 3 years, I had been told that my instincts were wrong, that my expectations were unreasonable, that my interpretations of situations were inaccurate. Rebuilding confidence in my own perceptions took time and patience with myself. But sitting in that coffee shop 6 months later, I realized that I had not only regained my ability to trust myself, I had developed a deeper understanding of what I actually wanted from life and relationships. I wanted partnership, not performance. I wanted someone who saw my kindness as a gift, not a given. I wanted to be with someone who made me feel more like myself, not less. I thought about that 25-year-old who had been so excited to plan the perfect first date, so determined to win Marcus's approval, so convinced that love meant constantly trying to prove your worth to someone. I felt compassion for her, but I also felt grateful that I would never have to be her again. The watch that had started this whole journey was long gone, but the lessons it had taught me were permanent. I learned that when someone throws away your love, they're not making a statement about your value. They're revealing their own inability to recognize something precious when it's right in front of them. I learned that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. Most importantly, I learned that the right person won't make you question whether you're enough. They'll make you wonder what you ever did to deserve someone who sees you so clearly and loves you so completely. As I finished my latte and gathered my things to leave the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Hope you're having a good afternoon. Looking forward to seeing you tonight." Simple, kind, no games, no mixed messages, no need to analyze every word for hidden meaning. I smiled and texted back, "Me too." Then I walked out into the Portland sunshine, wearing my yellow dress, carrying my book, feeling completely and authentically myself for the first time in years. The woman who had accepted crumbs and called them love was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly what she deserved and wouldn't settle for anything less. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. Sometimes the most important thing that can happen to you is losing something you thought you couldn't live without. Marcus's betrayal didn't break me. It freed me from a relationship that was slowly erasing who I was meant to be. What do you think about this story? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone's betrayal actually became the catalyst for positive change in your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please leave a like and share your own experiences. Thank you so much for listening to my journey, and thank you for being here with me today.